Subnautica 2 was supposed to be a celebration, a return to one of the most beloved survival games ever made, but bigger, co-op, and set on a brand new alien world. But instead, it's become one of the messiest gaming stories of this generation. The original creators have been fired from their own studio, the publisher is accused of sabotaging the game to avoid paying hundreds of millions of dollars in bonuses, and fans are calling for boycotts. There are lawsuits, leaked documents, and even accusations that executives asked ChatGPT how to get out of paying developers. This is the disaster of Subnautica 2, how a dream sequel got caught in a war between developers, publishers, and money. And just to be clear, a lot of what we're talking about here comes from the lawsuits, leaked documents, and public statements. That means some of this is alleged, unproven, and still unfolding. But before we get into the mess, we need to talk about why Subnautica 2 matters so much. The original Subnautica started as an early access experiment and turned into one of the most iconic survival games ever. It mixed exploration, environmental storytelling, and genuine fear of the deep ocean in a way very few games have matched. It also proved that early access done right can absolutely work. The game launched in early access and came out on the other side as a critically acclaimed success. That history is important because Subnautica 2 was supposed to follow the same path. In 2021, Korean publisher Krafton, the company behind PUBG, acquired Subnautica's developer, Unknown Worlds. Part of that deal included a massive performance-based earn-out bonus if the studio hit certain revenue targets over the next few years, and that bonus is going to become the point of this entire disaster. Subnautica's sequel was confirmed publicly in 2022, with Krafton telling investors that a new Subnautica game was in development and aiming for a 2025 release window, with early access planned first. Internally, the project was pitched as a co-op survival sequel, not a small spin-off, but a big, premium follow-up with multiplayer and ongoing updates. By late 2023 and into 2024, Krafton's financial reports began mentioning the new Subnautica project in much clearer detail, and that is where the first cracks started to show, at least from the community's perspective. In February of 2024, Krafton described the next Subnautica game in a financial report as a multiplayer live service game. For investors, that meant ongoing revenue, but for players, it sounded like the worst case scenario. Battle passes, microtransactions, and fears that the game would actually turn into some kind of underwater battle royale. The backlash was immediate. Fans worried that this calm, atmospheric survival series was being reshaped into another live service title. But Unknown Worlds quickly stepped in to calm the situation, and clarified that the game would still be fully playable solo. There would be no subscriptions, no battle passes, or season passes, and the vision was still a premium release, with only optional cosmetic microtransactions at most, but not a full-on live service model. This news reassured some people, but a new question was forming in the community. Who's actually calling the shots here? The developers or the publisher? As development continued, more details started to leak into public view. Players started hearing about an increased focus on combat and weapons, a more explicit story direction some fans weren't sold on, and the shift to 4-player co-op, which some of that sounded exciting, but for a lot of people, Subnautica was never about combat. It was just a survival game. The developers had to eventually respond to the backlash over the combat and the story tone, but they reminded fans that the core of Subnautica wasn't changing, even if there were more tools and threats. So by early 2025, we already had live service fears, direction concerns, and a fanbase watching the project very closely. But the real disaster didn't hit until summer of 2025. Subnautica 2 was originally expected to hit early access in 2025, similar to how the first game rolled out. Even Krafton's own projections pointed to a 2025 window. But in July of 2025, everything blew up. Krafton announced that Subnautica 2's early access release was being delayed to 2026, with the official line being, "We need more time. We need more biomes, more tools, more story content, more creatures, and the game just isn't up to our quality bar yet." And normally, that kind of delay would hurt, but people would understand and it wouldn't be a catastrophe. Games get delayed all the time. But what happened next turned a delay into a full-blown scandal. Around the same time, 3 key leaders at Unknown Worlds were suddenly removed. Charlie Cleveland, Subnautica's original director, Max McGuire, the co-founder, and Ted Gill, the CEO. Krafton replaced them with the new leadership, installing industry veteran Steve Papatis, known for his work on Dead Space and the Callisto Protocol, as head of the studio. And when fans woke up to the headlines, that essentially said, Subnautica's original creators have been fired from their own studio. In response, Unknown Worlds released an open letter asking fans for patience and insisting that the actual day-to-day development team on Subnautica 2 was unchanged, that the designers, artists, and engineers working on the game were still there, still building the same vision, and the leadership changes didn't mean that the game was going to be live service or gutted. But by that point, players weren't just concerned about design direction, they were asking, why was the leadership removed? And what does this have to do with that giant performance-based bonus from the acquisition? This is where the story goes from rough development into full corporate drama. In July of 2025, the ousted leaders, Cleveland, McGuire, and Gill, filed a lawsuit against Krafton. In that lawsuit, they claim, when Krafton acquired Unknown Worlds in 2021, it promised a massive earnout bonus worth up to $250 million if the studio hit certain revenue goals by the end of 2025. Subnautica 2's early access launch in 2025 was critical to hitting those goals, and as development progressed, the game was on track to meet or exceed those targets. But instead of supporting that, Krafton allegedly withheld marketing and localization support, interfered with the roadmap, and eventually fired the founders and delayed the game till 2026, effectively pushing that revenue bonus out the window. In other words, the lawsuit is basically saying Krafton sabotaged Subnautica 2's release to avoid paying a gigantic bonus. And if you thought that was bad, it gets even more wild. In new court documents, the former leaders allege that Krafton executives even turned to ChatGPT to figure out ways to get out of paying the bonus earnout. For a lot of players, that detail alone turned this into a much bigger issue than a corporate dispute. After the lawsuit went public and fans started boycotts, Krafton eventually extended the performance bonus period to the end of 2026, trying to show that the money wasn't the reason for the delay. But by then, people had already picked sides. But that's the version from the ousted leaders in the lawsuit. What about Krafton? Krafton has publicly and firmly denied that the delay or firings were about dodging bonuses. In statements to press and investors, they've argued that Subnautica 2 simply wasn't ready. The game didn't have enough content for early access. Internal milestones weren't being hit. Leadership had abandoned their responsibilities, with one founder allegedly focusing on a personal film project instead of directing the game. And the company felt a profound sense of betrayal and stepped in to protect the long-term health of the project. Krafton's CFO even cited the Subnautica 2 delay as proof that their internal milestone process was being rigorously managed, basically saying, look, if we only cared about money, we would have shoved this thing out the door. We delayed it because we care about quality. So we have two very different stories, the founder's version and Krafton's. But the truth is probably more complicated than either side's PR spin, and right now, it's going to be up to the courts to decide who's legally in the wrong. But for players, none of this looks good. After the firings and lawsuit hit the news, Subnautica 2, which isn't even out yet, started facing calls for boycotts of the game, and Krafton titles in general, and worries that Subnautica 2 is either going to be gutted, overly monetized, or turned into a product designed by a committee instead of passion. At the same time, the current dev team is stuck in the middle. Unknown Worlds has repeatedly tried to reassure fans that the core development team is still there. The game's not becoming a full live service model, there are no battle passes, subscriptions, and it's still a premium co-op survival game at its core. But when you mix together the sudden leadership purges and allegations of corporate sabotage, it's not surprising that a lot of people are looking at Subnautica 2 and saying, yeah, I'll just wait and see if I'll buy it at all. The Subnautica 2 disaster isn't just about one game, it's a kind of microcosm of where the industry is right now. You've got beloved indie studios that are getting acquired by big publishers, huge earnout deals that create pressure and then aren't honored, the constant temptation to add live service elements, not because they fit the design, but because it's what investors want to hear, and now, apparently asking AI how to structure a deal so you don't have to pay devs as much. None of that means that every big publisher is evil, or that every developer is a saint, but it does show how fragile creative projects can become once huge financial incentives and corporate structures get involved. Subnautica was a game built on trust, early access, player feedback, slow and steady iteration. Subnautica 2, at least so far, has been defined by mistrust between fans, leadership, and the shareholders. So where does that leave Subnautica 2 right now? As of this recording, the game has officially been delayed to 2026 for early access. The original founders are no longer in charge at Unknown Worlds. There's an active lawsuit accusing Krafton of sabotaging the game's release to avoid paying up to $250 million in bonuses, a claim Krafton strongly denies, and the current dev team that insists the game is still on track and that the vision remains intact, just under new leadership. The reality is, we don't know how the story truly ends until two things happen. The courts finish the lawsuit, and Subnautica 2 actually ships, and players get to judge the game on what it is, not just the chaos that surrounded it. But I want to hear from you. Are you still planning on playing Subnautica 2 when it finally hits early access? Are you boycotting it because of the way Krafton has handled things? Or are you in the wait-and-see camp, where you'll judge it based on the final product? Drop your thoughts below, especially if you're a longtime Subnautica fan. If you enjoyed this breakdown, and you want more deep dives into gaming history or anything gaming related, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss the next one. This is West Coast Ninja, signing out.